Hey everyone. So yeah, we started off with some tough technical difficulties, and today we are going to have uh, Dan come on for us, and I'm going to go ahead and put him on. I attempted to get a long profile of him, and it was quite extensive. So I'm gonna let him tell you about himself and or introduce himself. I know that he is published many photographs in a lot of books. So I see it's over 200 now. Is that where it's at, Dan? Uh-oh.
To be honest.
There we go. There we go. You were muted at first. Go ahead.
Okay. What would you like from me? Background?
Oh, yeah. I was just talking about how I attempted to do like this long profile on you, and it became quite extensive. And I don't want to butcher it, so I was hoping maybe you could tell us. And first, I'd like to know how to pronounce your last name.
Sure. It's Nedrelo. Nedrelo. So yeah, hello, Nedrelo. So,
Awesome.
and of course, you can just imagine how many different versions of that comes up. What even complicates it is hilarious. My grandfather's brothers all spelled it and pronounced it differently. It's Norwegian and means wet pasture, and which really jives with a lot of the work that I did in conservation of wetlands. So that's just kind of a little funny, ironic. And basically, my background was I was just one of those kids that grew up wanting to study dinosaurs, but there's a problem. There weren't any. And so the closest things to them were, as we were told back then, reptiles and amphibians. And now, of course, it's birds. But I studied all of it. But the reptiles and amphibians is what endeared me to them. The deeper I got into the details, the more fun and interesting it became. And so eventually I went on to become a herpetologist and worked as a DNA biologist and environmental survey assessment specialist, and for the state and different entities, and also did environmental education, because when you, my goodness, do unusual things, people want to know why, and if it's fun for them, then all of a sudden you got a crowd pleaser. And so that started going into 4-H and Boy Scouts and churches, and pretty soon college level. And then next thing I know, I'm doing other colleges, and as I continued my quest for travel and photography, one thing led to another, and it was another. I think I was in Florida by the time I was 18, and of course that's really excellent for critters. But during the entire time I did this, part of my thoughts were, where the heck are the Sasquatches? And I had started studying the literature on those when I was 10 years old. In 5th grade, my 5th grade teacher made the mistake of saying the word abominable snowman, and that led to encyclopedia and Shipton and the Himalayas and Yeti, and then you get the Patty film in '67, and of course, oh my gosh, I don't have to go to Asia. And then you read every book that you possibly can and study the behavior, and you know that some adults take it serious, but I didn't know any that did. And so I was relatively silent about the subject for over 20 years, till I started running into people who thought like I did, and that was rare and few in between, but we'd buddy up and try to find things. In 2000, my sister made me a bet after our mother passed away, and that was, you don't go online, become computer literate, and study the giants, and that worked professionally. So I thought, well, you can't let your little sister win a bet. It sounds like a blast. So one thing led to another. I was in the BFRO for 4 years, learned a lot, kept quite a few friends, and then went independent, took 5 years off, and a woman in Georgia had activity on her property, so I ended up in Georgia in '08, and it's been downhill ever since, just trying to interview every witness I could get to talk to me.
So, and I don't want to date you, and I'm not trying to be rude, but when you talked about, they called it the abominable snowman.
Right.
What time period were we looking at here when you first started getting into that?
I don't know, I'll date it. I was 67. I was 10 years old in 5th grade, and I graduated in '75 in high school. And of course, There just wasn't a lot of information on North American Sasquatches back then, but there was some, and there was a lot of localized names, you know, from the white thing down in Alabama, which is where I'm going next, to Grassman in Ohio, to I worked with Doug Hychek back in about 2003 or four when I was in the BFRO, and we put together a bit for his monster series on the Cumberland monster up in Wisconsin. And, then if you go into the literature at all, virtually every Native American tribe or nation had a name for these things. And they all had different philosophies as well. So I've always wondered, same thing, different species, species complex, what hybridization, what's going on? And as we talked earlier today, documentation can be a difficult thing to get one's hands on, and so basically anybody can say anything, and they do. So so what's real and what's Memorex is the question.
So I see that. I mean, obviously, you're a photographer and you've been doing this for a number of years, and you've been published in several hundred publications now. What kind of skill set are you seeing? Or, I mean, being a photographer, you kind of see where I'm going with this.
Sure.
You're looking at the photography online and the evidence that's being presented. What kind of issues are you seeing with that, being a professional?
Great question. People are publishing things that I personally would never put out there just because of the difficulty with the resolution, and some people feel the ability to see that others might not be able to. Well, it's pretty hard to see something if you don't know it's there. But if you do know it's there, and the camera just was a failure in capturing it, you're a leg up on it, and you know it's there. But it doesn't help the rest of us. And as far as we've got incredible equipment capability, but people like to invest in cell phones, which are pretty good at taking dot shots in the distance rather than a cheap used decent lens like I've got a Canon 300 f4, and you can get that for $500, which is cheaper than a lot of the cell phones out there. People aren't doing that. If they would, we'd have more people seeing them more often, at least by claims, that would have a chance at grabbing that dot shot and blowing it up with resolution if they could spend, $200 on a used camera with, say, 18 megapixels.
Uh-huh. So for those of you, for the people that don't understand exactly what you're talking about when you're saying dot shot, like I get it from having done comparisons in my work between a cell phone and um, a regular DSLR, even the cheap ones, like you said. What's the
Right.
difference? What are you talking about when you say dot shot? Just to help people understand what you're referring to.
Well, you see a subject in the distance, and you take a picture with a cell phone, unless it's an incredible cell phone with incredible resolution, and you're incredibly good at taking care of the camera shake, which is probably responsible for as much as the out of focus uh, problems that we see as anything. Um, that dot shot, you blow it up and it virtually explodes in most cases. But with a decent lens, you have the opportunity of at least having a chance of blowing it up and having some resolution and detail to it, to where it becomes, at least you can reduce some of the questions asked about the item. Does that
Right.
help?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just hoping, for some people that don't understand the differences, because
Sure.
one of the first things that we found was, the cell phone on the surface, it looks like it's taking a great picture. But if you like zoom in, it's not technically zooming in; it's just enlarging the pixels and giving the appearance that it's zooming in, and
Right.
that can be an
Right.
issue. I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Um,
Sure.
so you were a herpetologist, or still are a herpetologist,
Yes.
and you spent a lot of time overseas, in a lot of different countries, and you spent a lot of time off in different various like exotic places. And we talked about it briefly when we were on the phone earlier about some of your experiences and what particularly what you didn't experience. I was just wondering if you could kind of tell us what led into you getting into uh, looking for Bigfoot and how it kind of
Okay.
transitioned from you being uh, out all over the world, never experiencing anything, and then coming back here and then leading into your experience.
Okay. Well, I was very envious of all the people that I knew that got to travel and I didn't get to. And as soon as I got my driver's license, I was like out the door. So it was Missouri, Arkansas, all the states around me in Wisconsin, and then get south because that's where the concentration of larger populations of reptiles and amphibians are. So it was Florida, Georgia, eventually Arizona, and some of these places. And during the time I'm out there doing that, early on, I didn't spend that much time looking to finite, excuse me, uh, detail the options of looking for Sasquatches. I didn't know how.
Hmm.
And so I just focused on what I did know. And that was wildlife photography and reading as much as I could about how to come up with different species. And I wasn't always off the beaten path that much, but we were always looking for places where people didn't go because they had a tendency to kill snakes and they're eating numerous turtles
Hmm.
and gators weren't in big abundance back in the 70s and 80s. And I'll look at what we've done. There's 1.7 million or whatever the number is, just Florida alone. So that's remarkable that we brought so many animals back. Um, when I was out in Australia and Tasmania, we were basically looking for herps, but all kinds of wildlife. So I was fortunate enough to see duck-billed platypus in the wild. Uh, Actually caught a couple of echidnas, helping them cross the road, spiny anteaters, one of the two monotremes that lay mammals that lay eggs, kangaroos and wallabies, and we had our ham sandwiches taken by kookaburras, the laughing jackass, or wild kingfisher that they have over there, and well, we saw wild cassowaries, and we lived real cheaply, drove around Tasmania, camped, and basically put our sleeping bags on picnic tables just to be in and out and try to cover as much ground as we could. Well, I did go to a couple locations where there were Australian Yowie sighting claims.
Hmm.
And on one hand, I'm kind of glad I didn't run into one because I was solo a lot, as my partner was a big athletic dude who covered ground faster than I did. And I didn't want to slow him down. So I urged him in whatever direction he wanted to go. I'd take another direction and then we'd compare notes when we got back. So, and I was in Australia 40 days and 40 nights, including a week in Tasmania. And then when I went to Haiti, I was volunteering with the Milwaukee Public Museum. So our job there was basically a reptile and amphibian collection for William Henderson's book on reptiles and amphibians of the Caribbean. And so we were looking at trying to discover new species of lizards and new species of tree snakes and things of that nature. Um, no Sasquatch activity on Hispaniola that I could figure. And I don't think I've ever read that either. Maybe a few chupacabras running around. After that, Costa Rica again was birding, reptiles, amphibians, mammal work. Um, I wasn't down there a long time, but I got like 10 days in there and a few days in Nicaragua, and we spent a lot of time trying to do some sea turtle work. And the biggest concern down there was simply jaguars. Uh, and we didn't have any one-on-ones with jaguar. I don't believe that jaguar in general are responsible for any human mortality, but the fear people have of them because of what they can do is tremendous. Sort of like the fear that people have here of wolves, especially, and cougar and bear.
Hmm. Yeah,
And so during all those trips, I lived in Montana also for a while in '77, and we were in the back country there. And again, Didn't have anything major. I took a month off and I just studied the Pacific Northwest with my cousin who's in Alaska this week. And we traveled all over the place, primarily in Oregon, but we took in some Washington and Northern California, and no tracks, no prints, nothing like that, no vocalizations.
But it
So,
would but
you
it would be
know,
fair it would be fair to say that you've seen more animals than most people in in a totality of different circumstances and different places around the world. So you're used to seeing those kinds of animals, in different types of locations, I guess what I'm getting at.
yeah, yeah,
You have
I would agree with that.
of identifying, that's an animal, that's this. So when you do have something strange, you have a pretty good memory bank to pull from.
Yeah, vertebrate zoology is my strength.
Mhm.
So, I at one time I knew all the Latin for all the reptiles and amphibians in the entire country of Australia, not to mention North America. And I'm not too bad with bird identification, and mammals are pretty easy. So, and with the reptiles and amphibians, it's easy from the standpoint of they're not very mobile, and so
Mhm.
they don't fly and they don't travel over long distances, and many of them are precisely limited to certain habitat specifics. So identification, you open a book, you go, what's the distribution? And okay, that covers it. Now I've got it down to these three species. Here's the differences in toes, scales, or coloration, and you're good to go.
Mhm.
So and but the mystery opened once I joined the BFRO and worked with those fellas and gals and got to meet everybody that I had heard of through
Well,
John Green was there, John Bindernagel was there, and there was association with some of the other fellows. Finally, Dr. Meldrum and numerous other people, and I was just like in seventh heaven for about 4 years, and then I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I would have done this. I was told to do this. And there were a lot of different, opinions. And I decided maybe I need to just take a step back and refresh, which is
without
what I did.
without throwing anyone under the bus,
Sure.
what were some of the discrepancies of the way you wanted to do things versus the way some of the things were being done?
Okay. I was on a high testosterone, go, 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 go level. And I'm sure that I couldn't stop talking. So that probably made it difficult for some people to deal with me at the time because I was just filled with way too many questions that I should have had. And I was probably a little bit irritating to some people. So that's on my shoulders. And I just thought, it's probably best for everybody if I just back off, reassess, and I had some other personal situations going on, and then also my grandmother wasn't doing that well, and so I thought I better devote my time to family. And this has become a 24/7 on my mind. So let's just reevaluate and reassess. Plus, we
Okay.
were getting um, budget limitations for a lot of the resources I had for doing speaking engagements, and so I had to figure out what the next move was going to be,
So
if that makes sense.
no, absolutely, absolutely. I honestly thought it was gonna go differently. I didn't expect you to put all that on yourself. Um,
Well,
but
obviously, I will say this: there are some strong personalities out there, and if you look around, you'll see a lot of people who are very argumentative and very set in their ways. And I'm just honored. I just feel honored to work with everyone, and it's none of my business on how they operate. I'll just absorb what they want to share, and then go to the next person because I'm just
okay,
looking to learn as much as I can.
okay. So given what you knew then and what you know now, what would be some examples of how you've changed your way of investigating in the field when you're looking?
That's a great question. I was not okay. I noticed some people were especially enthralled with what we'll call forest manipulation. You know, try teepees and stars and different arrangements. And of course, I knew nothing of this. Personally, I had no reason to think that there was an association between a potential ape man or man ape and the women, of course. in associating with X's and branches and all that. And so that was something I pretty much ignored. Now I don't, because there's too many associations with it. And I've had some experiences myself that suggest I could be overlooking some things. We're finding tracks in association with some of these forest adjustments. And so that's one I could give a specific, and that is when I hooked up with Shane Carpenter and Randy Harrington on the private property that Shane was investigating. The landowner actually had structures put up on his property not far from his home. And I would just simply say that there were visuals to go with the structures. And so I was told that that's something I really needed to be serious about in checking. And since working with other people around the country, I'm finding the same thing. Are they all? I have no idea. What's exactly going on? I've really only started investigating it in the last, 4 or 5 years. So I'm not a dictionary on any of that. Other people claim to be. I'm just learning and listening. But that's one area.
Okay, so
Another area. Go
I have
ahead.
a quick question about these. You call them force manipulations.
Yeah.
um, um, when you see these, or when these other researchers that that are taking this seriously see these, how are we approaching these as far as evidence wise? Are we just taking it into context, photographing them, or are we actually looking to see where these may have been, especially with the one that you said there may have been a sighting that coincided with one?
Right.
How like for me, if that would have happened, I would have been approaching that as like a crime scene and possibly looking at, like, was this, these whatever this manipulation was, was it looked for hair, possibly places where it would have been touched, samples taken, how far into this are we talking about researching versus I don't know what else you would call it. I don't know. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sure. Well, the for me, it's been tracks, not so much hair. Maybe I'm just not good at finding hair, but that's the way it should be, you know, approached as a crime scene. And then, you're micro detailing uh, possible places where things have been grabbed, stepped in, uh, possibly other things left behind. Um, and the photography is such an important part of that. And of course, that can also bring us information that we might not see with our naked eye. So, but now you're dealing with a place where, well, for example, I've got a contact over in Michigan and he gets vocalizations and he gets repeat vocalizations. How does he do it? He will use his recorder and put it in and near and around some of these structures. So that's very suggestive of something unusual and repetitive. And I'm sure other people are doing this as well. That's one of the methods. Another method would be, well, if you're going to see repeated potential activity in that spot, can we put up some place to collect air, for example, something adhesive, something that would be, inoffensive, but yet effective.
Hmm. So
So those,
I
go
guess
ahead.
I'm wondering what the end goal is for some of these researchers that, it seems like they're walking right up to the line of almost conducting real research and
Mm-hmm.
then stopping. And it's a little confusing for me when we're talking about a possible undiscovered, non-human primate. And then it's like what I said, it's not being treated as such, because to me, that's a hugely big, I mean, that's a big deal. So why is it like walking right up to the line and going, all right, I photographed this, I got my cast, see, here's my evidence.
Yes.
Yeah, especially with, you have a sighting, then you have a structure or force manipulation. and then it's just photographed. It seems like you're almost there, but not quite crossing that line. And for me, that takes it into a whole new realm of uh, why a lot of science people aren't taking this seriously. Because
Great
you're only
point.
presenting part of it, but then you want me to
Hmm.
take it seriously. Um,
Well, this is where I think a tremendous number of us could benefit from what the steps are to take it over the edge.
mhm.
And so references to that, it's one thing to, I mean, probably half the people that get a hair sample pop it into a plastic bag rather than an envelope, for example. So DNA collection has always resulted in about the same things to date. And I don't know exactly why, although I've got numerous ideas. Back in the day, I was told that some of the hair from the tail of cattle can be confusing. And so there was that. So some of the hair was interpreted as such, regardless of whether there were cattle in the area or not. I found that interesting. That was some personal experiences I had. And
Mhm.
then, I should hold this back a little bit. And then we're looking at how, what's the definitive capability that we have in separating uh, our hair, the potential hair DNA from Homo sapiens. In other words, it continued to come up human contaminated. Is that so? What's your thoughts there?
So my thoughts on the hair thing. Most of the hair, from what I understand, that's being found out there is lacking that root ball or the follicle or the hair root, whatever you want to call it, that big bulb down at the bottom that's containing most of that nuclear DNA. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as hair grows, people have this misunderstanding that there's no DNA to be found in the hair without the root ball, right? Unfortunately, I mean,
Okay.
and that's not true. It has DNA. It's mostly mitochondrial. There is some degrading nuclear in there, but it's few and far between. Very rare that you find it, and that's also getting way beyond a lot of the testing that some of these labs can do. Um,
Sure.
it's specialized labs that can do this at this point. But I think the biggest problem we have is who is actually doing the testing, because I hear a lot, and even Darby Orcutt will tell you, he's done research to try to find out who's doing this testing. People say, I had this tested and it came back inconclusive, or it came back, unknown, non-human primate, or something like that. But then apparently when he tried to track down all these different labs, uh, he wasn't able to find out the actual labs that were doing this testing. So I got a lot of people who are saying it's being done, but I'm having trouble finding out what labs are actually doing this testing and saying that. And you have to remember that these labs that are doing that testing, they have a specific database that they're going to have to pull from, and it's just knowns. So when they say inconclusive, that just all that means is it wasn't in the database, right? Um,
Okay.
and then as far as human contamination, again, that's why I asked, what labs, what qualifications do they have? Are they, these certified labs that are following certain protocols while they're doing their testing? Because um, you can actually clean this hair with alcohol and decontaminate the exterior, right? It can be done. So if they're coming back and saying it's contaminated, then I wonder, is this just the person saying this, or has this actually been tested? Because if we submit hair, um, they're going to do that one testing, then they're going to clean it, and they're going to do the other, right, and go for the interior. So I
Sure.
got to wonder when someone says contaminated, if that's not for me, that's almost a red flag.
Right.
When I start going down all the different lines of how this would actually be tested, like in the crime world or something like that.
Hmm.
'Cause I can go, yeah, it's contaminated. Did you clean it? And then did you do the other processes? And I gotta wonder if that's being done, or they just look at it like some of our, the state crime labs, they actually look at it and they go, "Oh, it doesn't have a root ball or a follicle or something like that, so we can't use it." Right? I mean, that's some labs but it's not all of them. So,
Hmm.
the technology is ever changing. So one of the things that we're doing is we are having to, uh well, me and my lab partner, we're part of a, cold case task force, and one of the things that we quickly realized on looking at older cases was that, uh, "Man, I wish they woulda done this. Man, I wish they woulda done
Sure.
that." Like that. Um, and after so many cases of that, it now has us changing our methodology to which we are collecting stuff we never woulda collected. Um, we're preserving things that we never would have before on the off chance the case becomes cold, and we're trying to picture ourselves as, you know, maybe some future investigator gets it and they go, "Oh, well, we have the technology now to do this kind of thing." And I think for this kind of thing, it's eventually gonna be, s honestly, screw the typology or the morphology of the hair and talk about medullas, no medullas, stuff like that. Hair is gonna be DNA. That's where it's gonna come from on
Hmm.
for a Bigfoot thing, it's gonna be DNA. But that's kinda where I stand on the hair thing. It just there's too much up in the air when we talk about medullas, no medullas, all that kinda stuff, because our body is covered in hair, different types of hair. Some of our hair that if I have a medulla on one part, I may not on the other. We don't know what kind of hair, where it came from. It's gonna look there's
Sure.
different types of hairs just for one animal too. They got
Well,
guard
exactly.
hair, regular hair, zebras, black
Exactly.
and white. So just to make a blanket statement or even a thing of trying to use it for exclusionary purposes of medulla versus no medulla, I think is a bad idea. I think if you collect the hair, you collect the hair. It's evidence. And you hold on to it and you store it properly until it may be useful later. But I don't think we disregard it because it does or does not have medullas at this point, because we don't have a controlled sample. So I would say if you find evidence, you keep it and you learn how to store it
Exactly.
and wait until something may come up later that it now becomes very valuable.
Well, one thing that would be certainly helpful, and maybe this is already out there, but a modernized uh, number of procedures for hair collection or that type of thing. You know, uh, even casting tracks can be still such a mystery for so many people. And we obviously have so many new people coming into this, and there's just a lot of information. Exactly. Please promote that and promote that powerfully. Exactly. No, can you bring it up and show it so everybody can see it,
Oh,
if you don't
absolutely.
mind?
So what
You know.
this is, in case you're not aware, I am a certified crime scene investigator, certified latent fingerprint guy. I basically made this book. It was originally going to be for other CSIs, and then I got involved in this, so it was pretty much already written. And what it is how to cast your foot impression in different types of soils and substrates. So there's a different chapter dedicated to each soil and substrate, some tips and tricks and pitfalls, and even a whole chapter on how to document it and photograph it properly, trying to get everything into context. So that's
Excellent.
kind of what I did there.
And
Um,
what's the easiest way to get the book? Amazon, or what do you
yeah,
think?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, you're better at this than I am, obviously. Yeah, it's on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I've
yeah,
promoted it in my Wildman Literature group too. So,
yeah. So I know people want to talk a little bit. People get irritated, I think, when we just bash them over the head with, "You should be doing it this way, should be doing it that way." Nobody really likes that. Some people wanna learn, some people wanna, we gotta hit that. But you have done something that I have n that I'm hoping to be able to do at some point, and that is, you had a sighting of your own, right?
correct.
Yeah, yeah, you actually had a sighting. And I was just curious if you could tell me about it, because I would love to
Sure,
hear that story since I've not
sure.
actually
This
had
is
it. Oh,
basically the best way to get the details on it would be Shane Carpenter's experience. And he has gone on different uh, groups and been at different podcasts and been interviewed regarding the details of exactly what happened. In my case, I drive from Wisconsin down into the Ozarks, and it's at 2:30 in the morning. I get picked up, I get dropped off at the camp, and told, "Well, you just drove so many hours. I bet you'd like to just go to sleep." My response was, "Hey, it's the perfect time. Let's do it." So we walked just about a half an hour, and Randy Harrington had some night vision equipment, and you're watching, and all of a sudden we've got something peeking around some brush, and the question is, what? And we're looking at it, and it's 100 feet plus, probably. I forget exactly. I believe it's real close to 100 feet out. So I don't get a great view, but I can see this individual peeking around. And Shane announces, "I'm walking in, and you guys are guiding me." So he's the one that got he got the golden prize. But he ends up walking up to this individual. Turns out to be one of two juveniles that we have tracks and casts of. And it just lays in the grass and looks at him. He's up 7 to 8 feet away from it, shines the light in its face. It reflects silver gold back, and he sits and literally talks to it and spends so many minutes there. Turns around to walk off, decides, "No, I'm going to spend a little more time." Gets a rock thrown. There's some teeth chatter or clatter back, nervousness, primates. And then he says, "Okay, that's good," and walks back to us. We're simply extremely happy, high-fiving, and going back to camp. Now, obviously, if he'd had a cell phone, recognized that he had a cell phone, and taken a picture, that would have been very helpful. Wasn't on his mind at all. And you'll hear that over and over from a lot of people. They came into camp that night, and the audio picked it up in the morning, and they left a finger stain on one of the wipes on the table. So we were pleased that we didn't interact with them so negatively that they wouldn't come in. The next night, we were going for the big male, who at the time had a footprint measurement of 15 inches. Shane's got all these footprints casted, and they're casted well. And there's some dermal on some of them. And
really?
yes, and basically, we went up the hill the next night, spent time up there, came back down. Randy checked the audio, and the audio suggested that, yes, they were here again. So we went to bed. Got up in the morning, the audio was checked, and for all the items on the tables, you could hear the sound of each and every individual item being checked out, and perhaps the nails clicking on the tables. When they got to the medical bag, it was zipped and unzipped about 17 or 18 times. And then you hear the cooler close. Well, we checked the cooler. Appropriately, 6 Monster Cappuccino were missing.
Okay.
So that's what we've got. In the meantime, Shane has a tremendous number of casts from not only his group, I believe he's got casts from another group not far away. And the sizes of the individuals are similar in design. So what we've got a big male. In ours, we've had a big male. I'm sure he's probably over 16 inches now, but he was 15 inches originally. And then the female, if it's the same one, has gone from 12 to 14. We had 210 or 10.5 inch. The 10.5 inch size, those are the ones where you get more prints. And there was a line of over 100 prints and photographed. He ended up casting about 35 of those.
So
And
when you say male and female, you're basing these off of foot size?
basing them off of collective combination visuals, behavior, and differences in the foot. Yeah. Now, can I vouch that the sexes of these are all exactly as said? No, I can't. But the presumption is that the individual that we had recently uh, got tracks of was male.
Mm-hmm.
Do I know that for sure? No. Um, in the visuals, there was no. The males tend to be more slender waisted, wider shoulders. Females usually more slender as juveniles. And no, I'm going by reports. And
Right. You see
and
making my face.
oh yeah, and blockier built. So again, this is a lot of anecdotal
Mm-hmm.
wound down into what verifications we have. So,
Right.
and Shane would certainly be able to elect more comments on this than I. We're still gathering material. I haven't sat down with it all to review it all. So, but he's the man that gets the accolades. I was just the observer that came in to verify. My goodness, this is real. Thank you.
So that's what changed your whole thing right there, that one trip?
No, not at all.
No,
Not
no.
at all. Uh, with Shane, I don't know that I ever needed to be changed, to be honest
Oh,
with you, because of what did it for me was the literature search when I was in elementary school.
mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because I continued to read the distance between footprints, the the physical appearances described, and this is pre-internet. This is coming from all these different sources, and I found it very hard to believe you could have consistent buyers on details. So in my mind, just the physical aspects of these seem so difficult to fake that
Mm-hmm.
I thought, now with all the native legends, it only makes sense that there's something that's the cause of this. And the more information I acquired, and the more people I talked to, the more comfortable I became in realizing this is simply real.
Okay.
Because that's the easiest answer.
Oh, no, no, I totally get it. So I am about to try a feature I haven't done yet. Someone has a question for you, and I'm going to pop it up
Sure.
on the screen. It says, in all your years studying reports and doing field investigations, have you noticed any consistent environmental or behavioral patterns, like preferred terrain, seasonal movements, vocalizations? That's a good question.
Okay. First of all, as was said with the Legend of Boggy Creek, when that movie came out, they follow the creek bottoms. So they always follow, the rivers are a highway. And, you know, our our predator situation is on the increase. And I'm just going to reflect on our wildlife management. Our fisheries is better. Our timber wolves in Wisconsin are over 1,000. We've got 25,000 black bear in Wisconsin. We've had cougar all along, but publicly they're just starting to let out, oh, there's our first verified cougar in modern times. Right. And actually, the first one was actually shot in Chicago by police. It had trekked across Wisconsin, ended up in Illinois, and got into the suburbs of Chicago and was taken out there. And then the blood was matched with the individual from Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, I wasn't there to see that study. So is that what they're telling us, or is that true? I don't
Right.
know. But it's logical given the mobility of the species. We did find that we had a cougar with a neck collar that came out of South Dakota that ended up dead up in the Connecticut area. And that traveled across Wisconsin, Michigan. That tallied over 1,635 miles from point A to point B. So Eastern cougar is a real thing. And as you noticed, I put together a group called Eastern Cougars. And that was to help collect information, reports, and to help desensitize people that are terrified that they're moving into their territories. Um, as far as getting back to the environmental aspects of what we're dealing with now, I'm reflecting on more game, artificial numbers of white-tailed deer, which is a key species according to Matt Moneymaker, but also many of us who study this. Uh, there's deer carcass uh, sign, I guess you could say signature carcass sign, where there typically, if a Sasquatch kills a deer, very often, allegedly, according to reports, if they're true, then we've got broken hind legs in the back quite
Okay.
often.
All right.
And the theory is now you've got an animal that's alive, and so you've got fresher meat
Okay.
until they
So
decide to take it out and butcher. You know,
a-
uh,
as someone who's been around someone who's field dressed deer and things like that,
right?
when you're finding broken legs, deer, are we finding any teeth marks or tool marks on these bones that would indicate something other than human or natural predator, anything like that?
I have. I'll just refer to the twist. Sometimes heads are twisted tremendously so.
Hmm.
So it's like the head was grabbed and twisted around so tightly that it just makes for an incredible look and an almost impossible one. And so that's one character. The hind legs being another character. Um, my first experience with this was I was talking to an airline pilot who was in the organization, and he told me his experience was when he was 16 or 17, he was dragging a young buck out of the woods on private property. Shouldn't be other hunters there. He was being followed. He took that deer and he dragged it along and realized, I'm going to see who this person is. So he left the deer and then he went into the brush and stood behind a tree and watched, and a Sasquatch came down the trail. Well, that was enough for him. You know, that isn't something that's even possible. So he split. He did come back so many days later. The deer carcass was still there. And I don't know in what state, but all the internal organs were taken. And so that's another character. The internal organs are taken in many cases. Deer, heart and liver, especially liver. There's a high concentration of nutrients in those internal organs,
So
more so than muscle meat.
what about the meat itself? You know, for removing the meat from the deer itself. I was asking if there's been any notable tool marks or, dental impressions.
I don't, I'm sure there's dental impressions, depending upon who you talk to. How closely observed that's been is in question. Um, I'm studying the Alaskan situation with Fred Rail right now. He's got about 275 reports on YouTube that he narrates. And there's been a number of incidences with caribou, moose, and maybe a couple other game species that people have seen them um, actually at the site working on. I have a friend who feels he has a potential tool that was used.
Hmm.
Um, I haven't got the details on that, and it would be up to him whether I could share that or not. But there,
Got
I think there's a tremendous number of things going on right under our nose that we're not paying attention to so much. After a rain, we seem to get activity, especially with juveniles, and there have been holes with sticks in them that where footprints have been found close by. So
Mhm.
there's some manipulation going on, but so far, they're certainly not building cars, and they're
Mhm.
certainly not building uh, technical structures. Yet, if you look at some of the interweavings and some of the trees down and used, both manipulated by people or freshly tore out of the ground or broken, um, there's some amazing weaving. And I would say that that is an area that will further become under inspection, and numerous people are working on it. You know, there's so many private uh, efforts going on that aren't being shared. who knows what we have as this all starts to come together more and more.
That's very true. I've told you earlier when we were talking, I'm working on several different projects that unfortunately I can't, just come on a show and start blabbing about. So
Sure.
I totally get it, and I'm doing it just to have access. So, so what would you say would be a good way? I mean, we briefly touched on it earlier. For the average person who's going out and conducting investigations, as far as you're concerned, what do you think would be some better steps for improving those investigations?
Cliff Barackman made an example regarding photography of the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Oh, I got a picture.
Right.
Shoot with natural light, shoot with artificial light, and shoot different, your potential texture. You're looking for clarity. You're looking for detail. We don't have a picture up the size of a barn, but when we blow it up, we'd sure like to see it. And if you take 6 pictures, one is going to be better than the other.
Right. I was just going to say, like we say in the crime scene world, digital pictures are free. Take as many as you want.
Exactly. So, as we've commented on before, there are so many photographs that really difficult to work with them because they're just not very high quality. Well, if we can get the quality, we can at least get information, And then obviously, Adam Davies likes just cast it because that may pick up more detail than you would normally see with the eye.
I'm a big proponent of using both. I don't think it should be one or the other.
Oh, I fully agree. I'm, I can't even begin to tell you of the 7 Shane feels are the best. I can't even begin to tell you how many photographs under all kinds of circumstances. And I'm still in the process of evaluating them. And there's an awful lot of work to be done with I'm sure Dr. Meldrum's collection and Cliff's collection, and as these artifacts continue to come to us. John Bindernagel was a major proponent of the importance of this. All too often we run into people who are, oh yeah, we got tracks all over the place. I don't even pay attention to them. Well, some of us would drive half the continent to see a good set of tracks.
I think at this point I might go myself. I've got to see something in situ. I got to see it. It's I don't even know where to begin. Luckily enough, I've been told that hopefully sometime this summer, I get to go out to Cliff's museum and I get to go into his cast room and just document and play away. I'm nervous because I think a day or 2 may not be enough, but I'm very, very excited at the prospect of even been given such an honor to go and do something like that. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
I'm just smiling because I've been waiting for the time when I can work my way up through there too, and work with Jeff and work with Cliff in time. And I've got some friends that assure me that won't be a problem. We'll see. But I have been rather private in what I've been doing, partly also because of some of the extreme experiences I've had that I don't have an explanation for. And so there's questions about just exactly what are we dealing with? Why is it that the public is not presented with a specimen? Has somebody got a specimen? And if so, how much do we know about them privately versus publicly? And how is it that we can have all these claims, some from very legitimate situations with multitudes of witnesses, and we're still where we are. And of course, our forensics, you know more about where we are with that than anybody else, perhaps. So there's questions on what we can all do to up that. And I'll be acquiring your book as soon as I get back from Alabama, by the way. It's on my hot list. And so I'll be in touch with you more with that too as we go. But some of the experiences that we get are kind of off the charts, and a lot of people refuse to even talk about them. And for example, I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
The gal that I was
Uh-oh. All right. So he froze, and the picture that it froze on, I'm going to throw this out there and see if any of y'all think so. Does that look like Jesse from Dukes of Hazzard right now at this exact moment? Never mind. He's back. Awesome.
okay. I have no idea. My screen kind of went into twirly bird, and I wasn't sure what was cooking. So anyway, long story short, I'll give you an example. I'm working with a gal down in Georgia. She's got some track activity, vocal activity, had some vocals or visuals. I went down to spend time with her. I saw my first tracks actually in 2008, and I did not document them well except for the photography part. So what did happen was after I met her, I spent a number of years with her trying to learn more about her situation. So there were more recordings captured. And one night she called me at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was very angry. And I'm like, what's cooking? What's going on? She goes, I am so mad at you. And I'm like, oh no, what happened? And she said, I had 3 big ones at my window. I'm like, okay. And she goes like, that's 2 more than we thought we had. Okay.
It's
And
your fault, huh?
there was two more big ones. Well, the one in the back, its eyes lit up. And so she claimed. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, why didn't you tell me about this? Well, I'd never seen it. And I didn't know for sure that this was something that, was going to happen. And I was searching for something to desensitize her. I didn't want her upset more. So I simply kind of fibbed and said, I'm sorry. I just didn't think you were ready for this information. I calmed her down a little bit. And we talked about her visual. And then over time, we laughed about it as I told her and really described the situation. I still have not seen the eye shine that many people can just describe. I haven't seen the eye glow that many people describe, but it would be interesting to hear about bioluminescence information that would be applicable that made sense regarding a giant unverified species of biped that has us all amazed in believing that these are real. And I've got many, many long-term friends of 10 years plus who have had visuals. So
Mm-hmm.
now for me, I kind of live through them in a way because of they are certainly truthful people. Some of them have secondary evidence to go with it, and then some of them have followed up encounters with flares. So we're kind of all spinning our wheels in many ways about what's real and what isn't real, and there's different levels of what can you believe and what can't you believe.
No,
So
you're absolutely right.
I guess that in itself has a lot of us just spinning. And I guess my philosophy is keep it fun, learn what you can, and depending upon what your goals are, go for it. And for me, I want some more diurnal observation, or I want some diurnal observations so that I can at least. I'm also a biological illustrator, and I'm interested in specific detail. I want my digit length proper, my digit thickness proper, any potential pads and nails on those digits.
So, coming into my world for that impression type of evidence, I've heard before, and that was a comment that I made when I posted before I started posting. Hey, I'm going to try to do the show. I made a post with an impression that I cast with dental stone that was of my hand. I had basically put my hand into some clay and smushed it down kind of hard and kind of rolled it back and forth just to make sure I got my fingers down deep good enough so I could actually cast it. When I cast it and pulled it out, the what I saw was is that my fingers were actually they had the appearance of being shorter and stubbier. You know, they looked shorter and stubby because the width was now much wider than uh, what you would expect in the hand. I don't know if you heard all that because you were frozen. Uh,
I was off and twirly birding. Yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah. So I was just telling them
Sounds like
that.
you're talking about sausage fingers.
Yeah, people have been saying that, but I had a revelation the other day when, the on one of my posts, you see my hand showing the good dermal ridges on
Right,
one of the
right.
casts. And how that came about was I pushed my hand into some clay and pushed down really hard and kind of wiggled it back and forth to make sure it was deep enough so I could cast it. And it ended up making my fingers look really, really fat, which in turn made them look shorter than they were supposed to. So now it looked like I had a
Hmm.
giant hand that had very short, stubby fingers. And my first thought was, hey, that's what they've been talking about. And I could be entirely off, but I just accidentally recreated it just trying to show some dermal ridges in a cast. And, it's just another piece of information to put in the back of your head. Now,
Sure.
when I'm looking at uh, impressions in the ground, how much of the side of the finger showing that would now show me that it rolled back and forth, which is making it look fatter than what it should. So it's just another tool now that I have in the back of my mind. So,
Sure.
um,
Well,
just
I can run a footprint similar to that.
yeah,
Um, like a 19-inch print could make a 20-inch print very easily. Different
yes.
substrates, different angles, and probably using a similar technique with all that biomass on top of it that you just spoke of regarding your hand moving
Yeah,
around in the substrate.
and I'll tell you one of the things on why we have to take pictures when we do our when we take a picture of that foot impression from the top, trying to fill the frame up. Um, if you take a picture and you're off parallel from the surface, you can make it look a lot more elongated than what it is, and
Sure.
and I've seen that, the distortion within the photograph. Um, so it's one of the first things they teach us in crime scene, like 101 for taking pictures of things is,
Sure. Well, with
context
wide,
and yeah, good.
well, I was just going to say with the wide angle lenses, of course, with the fish trick or the snake trick, where it looks like the animal's way bigger than what it is by being a little closer to the photographer, you
Yeah,
know,
I hold my fish
and
out
farther
towards
away
you like
from.
this.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I'll give you a good example of some of that physicality that I was talking about that impressed me back when I was 10. I was talking to SIR's director, Michael, uh, and he basically told me that he had come across prints in the snow that were 20 inches, very well 19, and they couldn't find. It was like standing on or near a log in the
Mhm.
snow, and the closest prints to it were 20 feet away. It had leaped from that standing position 20 feet.
All right,
And
20 feet's pretty good. I would like to have, seen, that impression from the jump off point.
exactly, exactly. But the point I'm trying to make is that we don't know what the physicality of these things are. When I was in 10th grade, I was haying in a in the in the on the farm, and we would build up the hay bales as high as we could go on the haystack and just jump off them for fun. And I know I was jumping at least 18, 19 feet off the ground with no problem. Small body weight, what was I, 165 pounds? But
Mhm.
just imagine what's going on with the heights and the distances that these big fellas could potentially cover from
Right.
leaping out of a tree, down a cliff, across. In the case that I always remember from age 10, reading in the book Out of Apes Among Us by John Green, the reference was whoever did this must have had incredible muscles, because it was one side of a gully, and they leaped from the bottom side of the gully up into the air and crossed the gully. And it was like 12 or more feet across and 4 to 5 feet higher on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to see the same track on both sides as it leaped across. And I just thought, humans just don't do that. And so that was my first thought at 10. And so then I started paying particular question or particular, I tried to pinpoint more similar activities that were described to see what else I could learn about potential physicality.
Uh-huh.
Now we know what a grizzly's top speed is,
Right.
Perhaps 35 miles an hour.
Right.
And we've got many, many claims of it paralleled me and I was driving at least 45. Well, an NFL wide receiver, running back, or wide receiver can cover 20 some miles an hour in active play field with the gear on. And that 40-yard dash can translate to nearly 28, 29 miles an hour for Homo sapiens. So
Right.
what's going on with something built similar yet different that stands 7, 8, or possibly higher than that?
Right.
And
And
then what kind of muscle system are we dealing with?
right. And
So
we've seen
this
how
is,
far cats can jump, right? With all that,
yeah,
page that you have,
yeah,
where it's just kind of standing on one side of a creek, and all of a sudden it just kind of leaps all the way across. It's like 20 something feet, and it just effortlessly does that. And it's nowhere near the purported stature or structure of what we're talking about.
right, right. So there's so many mysteries and so many questions and accuracy, but it's, as Cliff likes to say, congruent information coming from many different places that matches. How is a woman in the application or in the Appalachian Mountains without a television describing virtually the same face as one that we have looking in a window 1,000 miles away with somebody else, and over
Right.
and over and over and over. Questions about the eyes, the eyelids, the hands, the nails, the hairlines, all that. I just find that incredibly intriguing.
Oh,
So
it
I'm
really
trying to
is.
spend as much time with Alexa Evans's work
Mhm.
and Sibylla Christine Irwin's work. And I have to mention that she had a, a researcher or investigator, whatever you like, from Oklahoma on the telephone when he was looking at a 6-footer peeking around a tree at him. And she was able to draw from the descriptions he gave of that particular individual. And
Mhm.
that's very close to the individual that Shane saw when he was looking at it so closely from 7 to 8 feet away on that night in 2019 June that I got to have that experience. And
Wow.
I'll be glad to send you that image. Uh, she's given me an okay to share her work in scientific research situations. And of
Well,
course, she's worked with Doug Hychek and so many other people, you know. And,
I,
and I should also mention that Jeff Meldrum told me that the longest footprint that he had in his collection that he felt was verifiable was 19 inches.
interesting.
So that's interesting.
It is. It is. All right. So we are nearing the end of the time, but Verax, if I'm saying that correctly, has one more question that
Sure.
I would like to put up there that I think is a good fitting in for it. And there it is. Is there a particular piece of evidence or encounter that stayed with you, something that you find yourself coming back to again and again because it just won't let go of you?
Recently, it's one of Fred Rail's personal experiences that he's had up in Alaska. He had activity going on and had visuals up until 2006 when he got intimidated. And
Mhm.
so he takes them very serious. Why he does what he does is simply to help other people. In other words, you might want to be thinking twice about going to that particular location because of repeated experiences with them. They seem to be more aggressive there. Now,
Mhm.
people aren't getting ripped. We don't have a big list of people who have been ripped limb from limb or shredded, but they seem, and probably the biggest surprise that I got was the fact that they're not taking out the vehicles much. They're
Mhm.
not taking out the equipment. In other words, those bush pilot planes are okay, and they might be tanking rocks on the engines of some of the skiffs, but they seem to be okay. And we've only had, in his 270 some reports, I've only seen two or probably three reports where, like the snowmobile was twisted and set vertically in a snowbank, or a sled was picked up and thrown like a discus 30, 40 feet into the water, or something like that. But they're really
Okay,
nasty
those
on
are those are
houses.
stories that you've heard, but what about evidence for you personally?
I was gifted a burdock after I came back from being burned.
Uh-huh.
I was 17 days in the hospital with skin graft surgery. I come back to the private property that I'm working, and uh, here's this burdock, as I'd mentioned before. The roots twisted off, which were a cancer inhibitor,
Mhm.
and, uh, and the burdock is for burns. Who
Mhm.
would know that? How did that come about? That
Right.
hit me pretty hard.
And what's a burdock?
Burdock is like a sticker plant, so you walk
Okay.
you
Mhm.
walk in the brush and you get all these stickers on you.
Okay.
There's different species, I'm sure.
Yeah, so
So
you had
that's
context, it meant something, it was relevant.
yeah,
That's what you're saying, right? Yeah.
right. How could this even be possible that a
Mhm.
plant that helps with burns would be put on the trading block where I'd had other items placed back and forth? That was one. Seeing my first line of footprints was very impressive. That really was amazing to me and appreciated. I'd waited a long time for that. And the first vocalization that I got in Wisconsin was a good one. There were dogs and coyotes up on a hill arguing, and all of a sudden we got a very low, deep bass going across the valleys. Both canines just shut right up, and I had got that recorded, and I sent that to my friend Mike over in Colorado, and he called me back and he goes, "Daniel, congratulations, you hit." Now I didn't see the sound maker, you know,
Uh-huh.
but
Right, right.
that was pretty incredible. The way
You
I
know
found that property was a rattlesnake investigation, and the woman had screams after she locked her basement, and she was in the house the first night alone. She had something outside the door screaming at her for 15 minutes, skull splitting, and she had rats and mice, or at least rats and young rats, coming through the floorboards in the kitchen, and they were having problems walking.
Oh, okay.
So that is what clued me on to that particular
Mhm.
place. There was enough interesting things that happened there that I stayed Johnny on the spot for over 12 years investigating. Plus,
Wow.
I got a silhouette shot on the game cam that eventually you'll see that I keep offline because of the way that people steal and disrespect others. And
Yeah.
eventually, I'll have that in any publications I put out in the future.
Well, I
And
appreciate
it
that.
looks like a head and shoulders with a. It's almost like one of the Southeast Asian uh, uh, guys that surfboard, and you're out with the long hair in the wind. That's pretty
Mhm.
much what the hairstyle looks like. So unfortunately, the flash did not go off on that. So,
Oh,
but
well,
those are some of the experiences I've had. And speaking with, there's one in particular, and I'll bring this up for the person listening that asked. A friend of mine, Teresa, when she drove across from the Twin Cities over across the UP into Michigan, she had her 1-year-old son with her, and she stopped along the highway in a nice woodland area with just a little rest stop. As she was trying to sleep, she woke up in the middle of the night to a terrible odor. and convinced it was her son pooping his diaper. So she turns the lights on and she checks it out, and the diaper's fine. Window's quite down. And then she realizes that he's staring at the window. And she looks up, and here's this large, hairy man with Angora goat locks looking down with his hand on the hood of her, I can never pronounce it right, I apologize, vulva station wagon. And she's sitting in there behind this, there you go, whatever. And back in the day, and she's sitting behind the steering wheel, terrified at this point, thinking, "No, we're dead." And she just flapped back against the steering wheel. And as she watched and looked into its face, it looked far more curious and interested than any aggression. And eventually she realized, I'm in a vehicle. So she popped the key in and started it up and turned the lights on. It simply stood up, stood back, kind of shaded its eyes, and she backed up and took off. And I talked to her about that report probably 20 times over a period of 15 years, and it never wavered. You know, I would hit her and I would record her and get the details, and she'd come right back with the exact details. So that's one of the reports that I found extremely important. And I've got many, 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 many other experiences in Tennessee, Indiana, etc.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to have to start to wrap this up, though.
Sure.
Because I got 10 minutes before the next one.
All right.
Because I'm silly like that. I'm gonna.
Well, that's good.
I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for telling me everything about this and helping me be a part of my first experiment with this. That means a lot that someone of your stature would come on here.
And I'm going to ask you back on mine when mine start rolling, if that's okay.
Of course. Absolutely.
Good.
Dan, it was a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much. And for everyone that tuned in for this first one, thank you. And good questions, Virex, or I know I'm butchering that, but thank you. All right, everybody, have a good one. Thank you very much.
And I want to say I invite anyone to talk with me who wants to at any time. I'll be glad to return the favor.
Before we go, you're going to a conference this next weekend, right?
I am.
Yeah, you're going to be speaking where? At the Alabama Bigfoot Conference.
Yeah, through Anita Collier. Yes.
All right. Everybody check that out. All right. Thank you, guys. All right.
Okay.